Almost 3 years ago, on November 15th of 2019, Sony's female-centric Charlie's Angels reboot premiered. Leading up to its release, director Elizabeth Banks attempted to shame all men into going, in not so many words saying that if men opted out of seeing her movie, then that would be an act of sexism. Even so, the movie went on to flop horrendously, opening to a mere $8 million. Forget the men. At the time, we made the observation that more women went to see Rambo Last Blood than went to see Charlie's Angels. Now, 3 years later, director Elizabeth Banks spoke publicly about the movie's spectacular failure, but she appears to be going for some revisionist history. In this editorial, I will begin with going through the narrative she is trying to put out there today, and then I'll compare that with what she actually said at the time of the movie's release, before seeing which lessons Hollywood desperately needs to learn from this. Banks actually spoke out in a New York Times Magazine puff piece, which means that there were no critical questions and no actual journalism taking place, just a furthering of the narrative she wanted to put out there, and on top of that, it's hidden behind a paywall. Luckily, the relevant comments were further disseminated by Variety, so let's go to their coverage. Be warned that you are about to be gaslit. Afterwards, I'll show you how, but let's first go through what she said. Variety writes, looking back at the poor box office performance of her 2019 Charlie's Angels reboot, Elizabeth Banks has some regrets about the film's marketing. I wish that the movie had not been presented as just for girls, because I didn't make it just for girls, Banks told the New York Times. There was a disconnect on the marketing side of it for me. Banks said that, when women do things in Hollywood, it becomes the story. There was a story around Charlie's Angels that I was creating some feminist manifesto. I was just making an action movie. The Pitch Perfect 2 director added that she would have liked to have made Mission Impossible, but women aren't directing Mission Impossible. I was able to direct an action movie, frankly, because it starred women and I am a female director, and that is the confine right now in Hollywood. Oh, woe is me. I'm so discriminated against. We must crush the patriarchy and teach all men everywhere a lesson. She didn't actually say that last bit, but she might as well have, because it would fit right in with the rest of her sob story. Let's begin with Elizabeth Banks' claim that she didn't write a feminist manifesto, she just made an action movie. Yeah, sure, an action movie where the hatred of men is palpable and the misandry almost reaches the levels of Marvel's She-Hulk. An action movie where every single man on screen is either evil, inept, or incompetent, or a combination of all of the above. As we covered in our contemporary postmortem of that movie, which I invite you to check out, link is in the description, the downfall of that movie began with the script, which was so bad that they couldn't attract any bankable talent. But why was the script so bad? Well, frankly, because of the wokeness and the misandry. The girl power and victimhood messaging came first, but since it's not based in reality, that very messaging precluded the narrative structure and character development which normal people innately expect any story to abide by in order to be considered good. For all intents and purposes, the movie was a misandrist girl power fantasy even at the scripting stage, and the finished movie was marketed as just that. The marketing was completely honest, and no matter what she may claim now, Elizabeth Banks was fully on board with and actively participated in selling it as a feminist manifesto at the time. Leading up to the movie's release, she told Collider that letting female rage express itself was one of the most important aspects of the new installment of Charlie's Angels. We literally have a character who is essentially working at a big corporation and is not being believed or listened to by her bosses. We have as much validity in what we're feeling and how we want to go about living in the world, being in the world. And that was really important to me, that we felt like we had characters that were being taken seriously and given a chance to live their best life. She flat out told The Guardian it was all about feminism and filled with a female-centric agenda. I mean, the headline of their piece is literally, Elizabeth Banks says, "My film is loaded with sneaky feminist ideas." Going back to Collider, she left no doubt who the movie was made for. When we were casting the movie, I wanted really fresh faces. I wanted a diverse cast. It's important that women, the audience for this movie, see themselves in some part of this movie. I think that's really important. I want the audience to feel a sense of ownership over the film, that they could be in this movie, that they could live in this world. It's a real message. In short, Elizabeth Banks lied in the New York Times Magazine piece. She didn't make an action movie. She made the very feminist manifesto the movie was rightfully and truthfully advertised as, and she made it strictly for women only. Alas, neither the women it was made for, nor the men it wasn't made for, went to see it. In the New York Times piece, Elizabeth Banks is trying to pitch herself as the director for a Mission Impossible movie. Under no circumstance can Paramount or Tom Cruise let that happen, because Elizabeth Banks is an activist who demands others let her use their properties to push her agenda at their expense. And it is expensive. Sony lost around $50 million on that whole Charlie's Angels venture, and on top of that, they saw the brand devalued in the process. But did Elizabeth Banks learn anything from this? Is there any humility to be found, or any indication she might have grown as a filmmaker? Nope. At the time, she blamed the failure on men, despite the target audience of women being the ones who failed to show. And today, she blames the failure on the marketing, which she was front and center in, and which was perfectly honest and transparent about what the movie was. So is she suggesting that the marketing should have lied and presented the movie as something it wasn't? Because it was the misandrist manifesto it was sold as, yet she expresses no regret over her own creative choices. It's always someone else's fault. Not only that, now she demands to fail further upwards, feeling entitled to do it all over again with Mission Impossible. That is the lesson here. This is what Hollywood gets for catering to activists such as this. The studios suffer some hefty losses. They get their brands and properties devalued, but no apologies and no self-reflection, only demands for more. That is the activist way. Do you think Hollywood are starting to learn these lessons? Or do you think someone out there are scrambling right now to offer her Mission Impossible? Let me know in the comments.